Back in 2021, I took a job as a wildlife field technician in the Pacific Northwest. The position involved tracking and documenting animal activity deep in national forests. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was nothing to brag about, but I just finished school and wanted something remote and peaceful. Emphasis on peaceful. That peace, though, was broken my third week on the job. My assigned area was in a particularly dense stretch of forest that was known for bear sightings, so I had to carry bear spray and make regular check-ins with my supervisor. Most of the time, I'd hike a couple of miles, set up a few motion sensor cameras, take notes, and hike back out before sunset. The thing was, due to a scheduling error, I ended up having to stay overnight in the field, alone. We had small, pre-built observation cabins scattered throughout the forest for exactly that purpose. They were pretty bare bones. A cot, a radio, a single light powered by a car battery, and a lock on the door that looked older than the trees around it. I wasn't too worried. I'd done overnights before, but that night would be different. The sun set around 7:30. I cooked a quick meal from a camping ration, wrote down some notes, and sat in silence, just enjoying the sounds of the woods until they stopped. It was around 9 p.m. when I realized how still it had become. No bugs, no wind, no distant hoots or rustles, just nothing. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. I leaned over to turn off the little lantern and give my eyes a second to adjust. Sometimes silence like that is just nature resetting itself. And then something knocked on the cabin wall. Not loud, just a soft, deliberate knock, like someone gently rapping their knuckles right by my head. I froze. The cabin didn't have windows, but the walls were thin. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the inside. Nothing. I waited a minute, then two. Nothing more. I told myself it could have been a tree branch or an animal brushing past. But then it came again. 3 knocks. Slightly louder. Same spot. I wanted to speak, maybe yell, but my throat felt like it had closed up. I slowly reached for the old radio on the table, but it let out nothing but static. I flicked it off immediately, afraid the sound might alert whatever was outside. I sat in complete silence for what felt like hours, but it had only been 10 minutes. Then came the sound of shuffling around the back of the cabin. Footsteps. Not an animal. Not the 4-legged kind, at least. I know what a bear sounds like. This was different. This was deliberate. Padded steps, pauses, a crunch of leaves, and then silence again. I was gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles hurt. I didn't dare move. Suddenly the door rattled violently. The whole cabin shook. Whatever it was trying to get in. And the lock, an old rusted latch, did not seem like it was going to hold. I backed up toward the cot and held up the flashlight like it was a weapon. The rattling stopped as abruptly as it had started. Then something whispered my name. I swear to God, it whispered my name. Just once. From right outside the door. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. Only my supervisor knew my assignment for that day. No one else. The name was whispered so clearly, like it was coming from someone crouched just behind the door, like they were inches away from me. I did what I should have done an hour ago. I locked myself in the tiny closet next to the cot. I pulled the door shut, turned off the flashlight, and tried not to breathe too loudly. More footsteps circled the cabin, once, twice, then nothing. Eventually, I must have dozed off. The next thing I remember was waking up to sunlight filtering through a crack in the door. I was drenched in sweat, and my muscles were sore from sleeping upright. But the moment I stepped out of the closet, I noticed the door to the cabin was open, just slightly. The latch had been snapped clean off. No scratches, no forced entry, just broken, as if someone had unlocked it from the outside with a key. Or with purpose. There were no footprints around the cabin, no signs of wildlife, no broken branches or disturbed ground, just a quiet forest and a broken door. I packed up and hiked back out that morning without saying a word to anyone. When I returned to base, I filed a report saying I'd had equipment issues and requested a different assignment zone. Later that week, my supervisor mentioned in passing that the observation cabin I'd stayed in hadn't been used in years, that I must have been mistaken because it was supposedly scheduled for demolition due to safety issues. I asked him how that could be when I had keys to it, and he looked confused. "We don't issue keys to that one anymore," he said. "It's been locked for over a year." But I had a key. It was given to me in a packet with my assignment. I never found out who put that cabin on my list. And when I went back to the storage room to check, the key was gone from my envelope. There was no record of me being assigned to that sector at all. I've since left that job. I still love the forest, still enjoy hiking, but I don't stay overnight anymore, especially not in cabins, because if something can whisper your name in the middle of nowhere without ever being seen, it probably already knows where you're going next. I used to work late-night shifts at a local gas station off a rural highway in Montana. The place was pretty quiet most of the time. A few truckers, some regulars, maybe the occasional drunk guy coming in to grab snacks or smokes. Nothing too wild. The station had security cameras, thick glass at the register, and a lockable back room where we kept most of our supplies. It was just me working the overnight shifts, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I didn't mind. I liked the solitude. I brought books, my headphones, and I always had a thermos full of coffee to keep me going. But one night last year changed everything. And I think about it almost every time I drive past that stretch of highway. It started like any other shift. I clocked in, cleaned up around the store, stocked the coolers, and waited for customers. By midnight, it had already gotten unusually quiet. No passing cars, no engine hum. Just dead silence, like the world outside had paused. Around 12:30, a car finally pulled into the lot. It was an old, beat-up sedan, one headlight busted, the other barely hanging on. It rolled in slowly, like whoever was driving wasn't in a hurry, or maybe didn't want to draw attention. I stood behind the counter and watched as the driver got out. He was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothes with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't head straight for the door like most people. Instead, he just stood by the pump, not pumping gas, just standing. He kept glancing toward the store, like he was waiting for something. Finally, after maybe 2 or 3 minutes, he walked inside. I greeted him like I usually do. "Evenin', man." But he didn't say a word. He just walked past the counter and started pacing the aisles, not picking anything up, just walking. Eventually, he made his way to the back of the store where the coolers were, and he stood there, just staring at the glass for a good minute. I could see him on the security monitor. Something about him made the hairs on my arms stand up. Then he did something that really freaked me out. He looked up at the camera, dead on, and smiled, like he knew I was watching. I reached under the counter and placed my hand on the panic button, just in case. I didn't press it, not yet. But I was ready. He came back up to the counter, finally, holding a single bottle of water. He placed it down without saying a word, and I rang him up. He paid in exact change, still silent, still smiling. As he took the bottle, he looked up at me and finally spoke. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in days. "You should lock the doors after I leave," he said. I asked him why, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer, just walked out the door and disappeared into the night. I waited until his car left the lot, then immediately locked the front entrance. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I wasn't taking any chances. About an hour passed with nothing. Then, just after 2 a.m., the power cut out. The store went completely dark, except for the emergency lights. The cooler stopped humming. The radio turned off. I stood behind the counter, barely breathing. I figured it might be a blown fuse or something, so I grabbed the flashlight and went into the back room to check. As I walked through the door, I heard a sound from the front of the store. It was the doorbell, the little chime that rings when someone walks in. But I had locked the door. I turned around slowly, shining the flashlight through the darkness. There were 3 people standing just inside the doorway. I don't know how they got in. The door hadn't made a noise, no glass was broken, and the lock was still turned. They just appeared. 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing dark hooded jackets, faces pale, eyes wide, all of them smiling. I backed slowly into the supply room and locked the door behind me. I tried using the landline to call the police, but the line was dead. My cell had no signal out here as always. I could hear them moving around out there, not talking, just walking, pacing the store, opening coolers, shuffling things around. Then one of them knocked on the supply room door. Not pounding, just a polite knock. "Let us in," a woman's voice said. It was quiet, almost cheerful. "We just want to talk." Another voice added, muffled by the door. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just stood there with the flashlight off, holding my breath and praying they'd leave. They stayed for what felt like hours, occasionally knocking, sometimes laughing. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. I waited a full 30 minutes before coming out. The power was back on. The lights were on. Everything looked untouched, except for one thing. A single water bottle. The same brand the man had bought earlier. It was sitting on the counter. I reviewed the footage from the security cameras. Nothing. Just static during the entire time they were in the store. The camera feed cut out exactly when the power did and didn't come back on until right after they left. I called the cops later that morning, filed a report. They looked into it, but they didn't find any evidence anyone had broken in. The doors were still locked. No fingerprints. Nothing. I don't know who those people were. I don't know how they got in or why they were there. But I quit that job the following week. Sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I'll pass that old gas station. It's closed down now, abandoned. But every now and then I swear I see a faint light inside, or a figure in the window. And whenever I stop for gas at night now, I never buy water.